and specifically around financial products. So I worked lead generation around multiple financial products. You did as well. And we were talking about some of the debt settlement stuff, people that had got themselves into the deep end of their credit situation. And you were just telling me that these people, these types of people, sorry to stereotype them, but they couldn't even do basic math. Mm-hmm. And so they just couldn't even understand a basic concept of what my income is versus my expenses are. So what was the mindset of that type of a person going on? Like, what is holding them back at that point to not even be able to understand basic math like that?
Yeah, so, I mean, the title of my book is The Unplugged Alpha, so I put people into 4 different quadrants, and the bottom half of the quadrants, which I'll explain in my talk today, are basically the plugged in. You know, they're the sheep, the useful idiots, the ones that stood on the dots and wear the face diapers when the government told them what to do.
My kids call that the NPCs.
The NPCs, yeah, sure. That's how they end up with debt. And you know, there's a lot of marketing put behind financial institutions today, and they use slogans. And I'm going to change the language a little bit so it sounds different. But you've got a lot more money than you think. And then they'll invite them into the financial institutions. They'll give them instruments, products, and services that let them borrow and borrow more than what they can afford. And really, they do all of this to, like, it's a twofold process. But the financial institutions in Canada, anyway, and I'm pretty sure it's very similar in the States, is they want you to have financial products and access to credit, because that's where they make the vast majority of their money. They're lending out money they don't even have in their vault. You know, they do it in such a way, and they encourage people to use it and just make minimum monthly payment. And most people believe that'll get them out of debt, although at some point they overextend themselves and they get themselves to a point where it's like they're just throwing money basically in interest payments, and they never see it go down, and they either are at the point of defaulting or they are defaulting. But there's a huge contingent of the population that lives that way, where it's just paycheck to paycheck, and there's always more month at the end of the money for them, and they slam up against a wall and they need help.
And those types of people, specifically in that quadrant, have a hard time building wealth.
Yeah.
And that's because of their mindset or their relationship around money?
Yeah, it's just a belief that they hold that it can go as far as anybody that's created wealth is just evil. You know, like they have that sound
like a victim mentality, or they sort of...
Yeah, it's a victim mindset, and it's like, you know, like money is the root of all evil, and those that have it have acquired it through nefarious means, and they're all bad people, and you know, it's an us versus them. So they think that, you know, if we sort of like hate on the rich or the wealthy or the people that have created wealth, it solves their problem in some sense or regard, but all it does is just like commiserates misery sort of thing. It's like misery loves company.
Yeah, okay. And what's the next quadrant?
So there's the plugged in, there's the unplugged, and then I'm mostly dealing with men, so we've got like the alphas and the betas, just see up on the side when I talk about it, but I work getting guys towards the unplugged alpha category.
From a beta to an alpha?
Basically, yeah. People
can make that switch?
Very easily.
So it's certainly, I guess, then it would be more of a nurture versus a nature?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's 3 words. It's do the work.
Do the work.
Yeah, and I define, you know, what the work is when I get them through all that.
Did you go through Wake Up Warrior?
No, I've heard about it though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like he maybe led that movement, as far as I know, about a decade ago.
Okay.
Garrett White and Wake Up Warrior, and that's kind of one of his sayings, like, do the work, right? But we have to do the work. I have a saying that you can have everything that you want in the world, and it's all on the other side of work.
Yeah.
Right?
It's dressed in overalls and it looks like work, and most people don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so taking people from a beta to an alpha, what does that even mean?
It means making pretty significant changes for
But
most people.
how would you classify somebody as being a beta?
It's probably about 80% of the population, you know, if we're being honest. That's basically like a plugged-in beta. They're the useful idiots that comply with everything. They punch a clock, they go to a job, they do what they've been told to do, right? And they'll follow all the instructions that marketing, media, culture, Hollywood has been selling, music, all of these sources, inputs that, you know, have been selling them for basically their entire life. You know, go to school, listen to what they tell you to do in school, which is where they teach you to color within the lines and cross your T's and dot your I's. Go get a job. JOB stands for just over broke, in my opinion. And then they go out into the world and they borrow. They get a car, they get a house, they think that they're living the dream, but they find themselves essentially enslaved in debt under the control of those that they owe money to, you know, following their rules to make sure they continue to live. One of the biggest questions that I got during the Psychosis sickness was the notion of I have a house, I have a wife, I have kids, and my employer's telling me that I have to take this experimental jab to keep my job. I don't want to do it. I don't think I need it. It doesn't seem like it's something that's necessary. What do, Rich? It's like, what do you want me to tell you? You know, you've structured your life in such a way where you're fragile, and you have to follow the rules that they set for you. If you're anti-fragile and you structure your life in such a way that you could opt out of this, then you'd have different options right now. But I can't solve this problem for you, obviously.
Well, you can, but it's going to be painful.
It's going to be painful. It's going to take years and a time machine to sort of put you back 5 years to get you to go through the steps that needed you to get to where you're at so you can opt out.
So one of your country's greatest exports, Jordan Peterson, talks about this. I just took my daughter to go see him in Los Angeles a couple weeks ago. And he talks about the story he's been talking about a lot lately is the story of Exodus. I don't know if you've heard him talking about that. But in the Bible, the story of Exodus is the Jews, the Israelites, they leave slavery of Egypt, and then they are on the way to the Promised Land. But on the way to the Promised Land, they leave slavery and they have to go to the desert first. And so the story behind that is that you're in slavery and you want to go to the Promised Land, but you got to go to the desert first. And that's sort of like this story, right? So this guy doesn't want to take the jab, but he doesn't, you can't really help him. And in order to get him to where he wants to go, he has to go to the desert first. You're going to don't take the jab, quit your job, but now you're in the desert. Now you have no income, you have no skills. What are you going to do? And you have to kind of get your way out of that. And eventually you can get to the Promised Land. Would you say that's a fair characterization?
That's a great analogy, I think.
Yeah. You haven't heard Jordan Peterson talk about that?
No, I don't follow a lot of what he says because I see some errors in the advice that he's dispensed. I think he's got some good stuff.
You can't agree 100% with anybody.
No, but it's just like one of those things where I look at the way that he's raised his kids and the results that his daughter's getting, sort of thing, and some of the advice that he's dispensed around marriage. He had a 3-part series that I saw on the Daily Wire, which I opted in to check it out. I don't think it's wise advice for guys when it comes to choices and who to invite into their life, because it's more about negotiating than it is to be a little more discerning in your taste and who you invite into your life. So I think there's some flaws in that, but he's got some good advice when it comes to psychology and the breakdowns of just life in general.
Another thing, back to the beta, the NPC that he talks about in this story, and he really went deep into, and I hadn't really thought about it, but he talks about how tyranny and slavery are not the same thing. They're actually sort of opposite things, right? And the tyranny is, the tyrant is the leader, right? The tyrant is the one commanding things, and the slave is somebody who has zero personal responsibility, because they just tell me what to do, tell me where to go, give me my food.
The NPCs.
The NPC, right? So it's like, and then they get this slave mentality where they don't want to step up and take personal responsibility for themselves. They don't want to do the work because they're just used to being told what to do and have everything taken care of for them. And back to the story, the Exodus story, when they went to the desert, they didn't know what to do. They were slaves, and now no one's telling them what to do anymore. So then they start quarreling and fighting and bickering, and they said, finally, let us just go back to Egypt where we were slaves, because at least we were taken care of and at least we had food. I mean, this is the story, right? So I mean, it's a pretty well fit for sort of the beta, the NPC, if you will, right? Yeah,
one of the things that I've come to realize and notice about humanity in general is that humans love a ruler. And there's always somebody or some entity that they want to serve.
Not everybody.
Not everybody, but the vast majority of humans want
the 80%
to be ruled.
in that beta role.
Exactly.
But let's talk about the alpha. So then, how do you characterize the alpha then? The opposite of that?
The alpha is a guy that is admired, respected, is capable, competent, influential, can solve problems. I think that one of the most important skills that you have to develop as a man today is being an excellent problem solver, because that's what life is really throwing at you.
Which is the opposite of a slave.
Which is the opposite of a slave. They're looking for the next step, the next direction, the next task to do or follow, right? That's why they're so happy when they hear, there's this dangerous thing that we have to be careful with, so make sure you stand on these dots and you distance yourself and you wear face diapers. Absolutely, like what else do you want me to do, right? But that's the exact opposite, and that's a very small percentage of the population. It's not what the state wants. It's not what the rulers want. They don't want people making decisions for themselves. I think that slide that Gammon showed with the guy cracking the whip and the the large crowd and the few of them standing up versus bowing down and that changing towards the end is an excellent characterization of what that looks like.
Yeah. During the pandemic, Dr. Matthias Desmond got famous for that mass formation psychosis.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
And he talked about how in this mass formation psychosis, where everybody sort of kind of goes along with this, and he breaks down the reasons why, you know, lack of connection, you know, all these different things. But he broke it down sort of into percentages. I think he said like 30% will always just go along with it, 30% will always resist it, and then you got this 40% in the middle.
Yeah.
That for the 40% is people that could potentially go either way. I mean, do you think that's a pretty good representation?
No, I think it's larger. I think it's closer to 70-75% that are just the sheep that will comply.
Right, but how many of those sheep are? I like to call them. There's a lot of comfortable wolves in that.
Yeah, so those comfortable wolves are the same guys that were doing the. I've got a mortgage, I got a wife and a kid, and I can't opt out of this. So what do I do? And it's like you're still having or forced to comply with their rules. You still have to play.
But some of them
by their
wake
game.
up, right? The lions wake up at some point, right?
Those are the guys that are influenced to wake up and take ownership and make some new choices.
So those are the people in the middle. So some people will never wake up.
Correct.
Some people are sort of in limbo, and some will maybe go to the not wake up, but some people will.
Correct. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So that's why I was like, so the alphas is less than 30%. You think?
Less than 20.
Less than 20.
Yeah. It's a very small category.
Okay. So how do you help somebody make that jump?
Well, I unplug them from the lies. You know, that's why the title of my book is the Unplugged Alpha. It's like, you know, I love music. I always loved music when I was a kid. So when I hear albums that are around, like, you know, Metallica Unplugged or whatever it happens to be, you know, it's like, okay, you know, so let's check that out.
MTV used to do that series. With
Yeah. So it's like, you know, the notion of getting out of their box, you know, their matrix, if you will, you know, if we can use that term that's popularized by Tate, you know, unplugging from these comforting lies leads you to a new place of uncomfortable truths. And like we said earlier, you know, these truths force you to wake up so that you're not sleepwalking through life. You know, if you can use a red pill and a blue pill as like a notion through the movie, you know, The Matrix, where the blue pill sort of like puts you back to sleep and you comply and you sleepwalk through life, versus the red pill, it enlightens you and awakens you and forces you to lean into this new reality and sort of dive down that rabbit hole and explore it. Yeah. I really hope you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to watch the full-length podcast, you can find that over here, that clip's from. If you're newer to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe over here, and pin down below in the top comment, you'll find a bunch of useful links to my website, my supplement line, books, and a bunch of other stuff. Have an amazing day. Peace out.